Hello YouTube. So we've had a bit of a look at the historical background and development of Quine's feelings on modal logic. Now it's time to have a look at some of his more substantial objections. So Quine was one of the foremost defenders of extensionality, and extensionality is contrasted with intensionality. And much of Quine's distrust of modal logic stems from the fact that modal logic violates extensionality. So, what is extensionality, and what does it mean for a logical system to be extensional or intensional? Well, before answering these questions, we need to understand the more general distinction between extensions and intensions. Now it's important to bear in mind here that there is a sense of the word intention. If we talk about somebody has the intention to do something, or we talk about intentionality in philosophy of mind, well, intention in this sense has nothing to do with that, and you can see it because it's written with an S, whereas the philosophy of mind intention will be written with a T. So extensions and intentions. Well, we can illustrate this distinction with an example from Quine himself. This is Quine's own example. Suppose we take the term caudate to mean creature with a heart, and we take the term renate to mean creature with kidneys. Now, it so happens that all the creatures that have hearts also have kidneys, and all the creatures that have kidneys also have hearts. That's just a fact of biology. Everything that has a heart has a kidney and vice versa. So everything that is a caudate is a renate and vice versa. And what this means is that caudate and renate refer to exactly the same things. They refer to exactly the same objects. They denote exactly the same objects. They pick out exactly the same objects. However, very few people would say, at least intuitively, that caudate and renate mean the same thing. They don't have the same meaning. Being a caudate is not the same thing as being a renate. It could have been the case that caudates and renates were different. Evolution might have produced creatures that have hearts but no kidneys, or kidneys but no hearts. So, this is the extension-intention distinction. Caudates and renates have the same extension but different intentions. The extension of a term is the set of things it picks out, the set of things it denotes or refers to or whatever. The intention of a term is its general meaning. It has to do with sort of properties, qualities, attributes, that sort of thing. Intentions are rather more nebulous. But if you look up a word in a dictionary, then you will find the intention of the word, the meaning of the word. Okay, so that's extensions and intentions. I'm sure that's reasonably clear. Now, before considering extensionality in logic, I need to address the question, what is the extension of a sentence? So this just means, what does a sentence refer to? So take, for example, humans are caudates. Well, human refers to a set of objects, and caudate refers to a set of objects. What does the sentence humans are caudates refer to? Well, for somewhat technical reasons, the traditional account, at least going back to Frege in the philosophy of language, is that sentences refer to truth values, truth or falsity. Now that might seem somewhat counterintuitive, but I don't really have time to explain here why that is. If you're interested in knowing more about this, pick up an introduction to the philosophy of language. What you need to be aware of is just that traditionally there are two truth values, truth and falsity, and traditionally sentences are said to refer to one of these truth values. So humans are caudates refers to truth. Frank Zappa was born in London refers to falsity, because Frank Zappa was born in Baltimore. Okay, so the extension of a sentence is its truth value. Sentence refers to a truth value. The extension of a sentence is its truth value. And this means that the sentences humans are chordates, Frank Zappa was born in Baltimore, quarks are subatomic particles. All of these sentences are very different, but traditionally they're taken to refer to the same thing. They're very different in many ways, but they have the same extension, and that's truth. And then of course there are many other sentences that have the extension of falsity. Okay, so that's the sort of background. That's the extension of sentences. Right, it's time to consider logic, extensionality in logic. Now, the parallel to sentences in a logical system are its formulas. And we would say that the extension of a formula, just like the extension of a sentence, is its truth value. So we can now explain just what it means for a logical system to be extensional. Right. Suppose we have two formulas, A and B, and B is a part of A. And suppose we take some other arbitrary formula, we'll call it B star, and B star has the same truth value as B. So B star has the same extension as B. And now suppose we take A and we replace all the occurrences of B in A with B star. We'll call the result A star. Now, a logical system is extensional just in case, after making any such substitution, A star has the same extension as A. That is, A star and A have the same truth value. That definition might still be a bit confusing, so let's consider a specific case. Suppose A is P and Q, so that's A is P and Q, and B is P. So we have two formulas, A and B is a part of A. Now suppose that both P and Q and P are true, so they're both true. Now B star is the formula R, and R is also true, so R has the same extension as P. Let's replace P in P and Q with the formula R, so that gives us A star, R and Q. It should be obvious that both A and A star, that is both P and Q and R and Q, are both true, so they both have the same extension, and it should be obvious that if B star is any arbitrary formula that has the same extension as B, the resulting A star will have the same extension as A. That should be clear. Now this feature really shouldn't be surprising. After all, what does it mean to say P and Q? Well, P and Q is true just in case P is true and Q is true. Nothing else matters. The truth value of the whole sentence P and Q depends entirely on the truth value of its parts. We can replace either P or Q with any true statement and the resulting conjunction will be true. Now the same is the case with all the other standard logical connectives. So negation, disjunction, the conditional, the biconditional. In all those cases, the truth value of the whole sentence depends entirely on the truth value of the parts. In other words, the extension of the whole sentence depends entirely on the extension of its parts. And that's easily verified. It's why we call the standard logical connectives truth functions, and why we're able to make truth tables for them. They're entirely truth functional. Nothing else matters but the truth value. So you should understand now just what it means to say that a logical system is extensional, and it should be clear that standard classical logic is a paradigm example of an extensional system. Now an intensional system is just any system that isn't extensional, and it's very easy to demonstrate that extensionality fails in modal logic. So let's do that. Okay, consider, for example, necessarily P, and let's say that our formula here is true. Simple formula, necessarily P. Extensionality will obtain just in case we can substitute for P any formula of the same truth value, and the larger formula, necessarily whatever, remains true. But obviously we can't do this. So let's say, for example, that P represents 1 plus 1 equals 2. Well, necessarily 1 plus 1 equals 2, that's surely true. If anything is necessarily true, it's that you get 2 when you add 1 and 1 together. But now take the sentence, Frank Zappa was a musician. Both Frank Zappa was a musician and 1 plus 1 equals 2 have the same truth value. They're both true. But if we take necessarily 1 plus 1 equals 2 and substitute Frank Zappa was a musician, well, suddenly our whole formula becomes false. Frank Zappa wasn't necessarily a musician. He could have been something else. He could have been anything. So this demonstrates a very deep and fundamental difference between the standard logical connectives and the modal operators. The modal operators introduce intensionality. We see that extensionality no longer holds because we can substitute two formulas of the same truth value and turn the larger formula from true into false or from false into true. Okay, so we've seen that modal logics are intentional. And as far as Quine is concerned, this is a source for concern. For Quine, extensionality is a very great virtue. For the whole of his philosophical career, he was a very strong supporter of extensionalism. The problem for me at this point is that it's actually quite difficult to find in Quine's work. It's difficult to find many direct and well-developed arguments favouring extensionality. It's more something that just underlies everything else he does, but which he doesn't so often explicitly defend. So if you really want to understand why Quine is more in favour of extensionality, then you just have to become familiar with his work. It's as simple as that. You'll just have to read a whole lot of Quine's work. But what I can say is that for Quine, extensionality offers a great degree of clarity, and I think few people would have disagreements there. It's pretty clear that intentions are more nebulous, intentional contexts are more nebulous, more difficult to understand. And he also regards extensionality as something that's sort of just favours simple common sense, in that if we take two terms that refer to the same thing, then it's kind of ridiculous that a sentence containing one of those terms would change its truth value if the term was substituted for the other. Quine says, what is true of a thing is true of it, surely under any name. The truth of a sentence should depend on what object is denoted, not on how the object is denoted. If it depends on how the object is denoted, then it seems as though our theory just isn't complete. So just consider, for example, Frank believes that all creatures with hearts are creatures with kidneys, versus Frank believes that all chordates are renates. Well, now, the first sentence here may well be true, but the second might be false, because perhaps Frank has never heard the terms chordate and renate before. So the first might be true, that might accurately describe his belief, while the second doesn't. Now, in the case of beliefs, this kind of thing is okay. It's alright that the truth value should change, because we're talking about Frank's belief. But if we're dealing with, say, a sort of, complete scientific theory of the world, this kind of change of truth value shouldn't be happening. And in an extensional language, the substitutivity is preserved and truth value never depends on how we describe things. We'll encounter this kind of argument in much more detail in some later videos, but I'm sure you can kind of get the gist of it. Intentions involve problematic ideas like meaning, synonymy, properties, qualities, and so on. And Quine has problems with many of these ideas. So I'll just deal with one of them, or two of them. Take meaning and synonymy. So synonymy, sameness of meaning. Take the term chordate and the phrase creature with a heart. Whatever is true of a chordate is true of a creature with a heart. They're the same thing. But in virtue of what are they the same thing? Well, the extensionalist says that they're the same because chordate and creature with a heart denote precisely the same set of objects. An intensionalist would say they're the same in virtue of the fact that chordate and creature with a heart have the same meaning. They mean the same thing. But sameness of meaning is completely obscure in Quine's view. And I want to briefly present the outline of an argument that appears in his book Philosophy of Logic, just so you can sort of get the idea of what his attitude is here. Okay, so the problem with synonymy, with sameness of meaning. Chordate and creature with a heart, we would say, mean the same thing. Firstly, we need a clarification because evidently there are all sorts of meanings. There are all sorts of different kinds of associations that we make with words and phrases. Looking at it from a more poetic angle, it's quite clear that chordate and creature with a heart don't really have the same meaning. I mean, they obviously have very different literary qualities. All you need to consider is that a fan of analytic philosophy will get a kick out of the term chordate that they wouldn't out of the phrase creature with a heart. Creature with a heart's just more general, but chordate should give them a bit of a kick. Okay, so we need to specify more clearly the kind of meaning that we're interested in. So that's our first problem. Now, generally I think we would say that the sense in which chordate and creature with a heart mean the same thing is that they convey the same objective information. That's how Quine puts it. Okay, so our problem now is to explain what is meant by sameness of objective information. And according to Quine, there are big problems stating clearly just what counts as objective information. For example, let's say we have a matrix of 1000 pixels, and the pixels can be either black or white. So our matrix is capable of producing a black and white half-tone image. And suppose we're tasked with converting paintings into our matrix to produce a half-tone image of the painting. Right, well in this case we can easily specify what counts as objective information. Two paintings provide the same information when they determine the same points as black. These paintings might have slight differences of colour, but that's a merely stylistic flair relative to our matrix. Or one of them might have been done in thick acrylic and have that 3D effect, while the other is a flat watercolour. One might be painted on a canvas and the other on laminated paper or whatever. The point is, all of those things are just stylistic flares. Relative to our matrix, none of them convey any information. All that matters is whether or not the paintings determine the same points as black. That's it. Okay, so sameness of objective information is easily defined in the case of our half-tone matrix. But the thing is, the real world isn't like this. The real world doesn't provide a simple matrix of alternatives. The problem when deciding whether two terms or phrases or sentences convey the same information is we just don't know what to count. We don't have any rules that can tell us how to demarcate the information from the merely stylistic flares. And that's the basic problem. Quine pursues this argument further. I'm not going to. The point is just to give you some idea of what motivates his objections to intensions, of what motivates his love of extensionality. And I think you kind of have a basic idea here. One of the problems among many is that intensions induce ideas like sameness of meaning, but sameness of meaning is very difficult to define. Extensions are clean and simple and easy to understand. Intentions are messy and vague and don't seem so related to the real world. Well, hopefully you now have a sense of why Quine prefers extensionality, and this is the foundation upon which his objections to modal logic are based. He's very skeptical of intentionality. Modal logic is very clearly an intentional logic. And when you remember that, logic is supposed to be purely formal, it's supposed to be concerned with basic principles of reasoning. When you bear that in mind, it's actually quite understandable why Quine is uneasy about allowing these messy things like intentions to infiltrate our logic. Logic should be precise and very clearly defined, and intentions just aren't. So in later videos we'll see how Quine turns this general uneasiness into a detailed attack, but I think we've seen enough for today. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.